Yeah.
Hey, you forgot to talk about tokens, though.
Swabba do. I'll just cut that. I'm still recording, so I'll cut that little part in.
Yeah. You know what? Maybe just we should make a 30-second spot for the tokens that we just cut into every episode at some point.
Yeah, we can even just do it before we even get into the intro. So, like...
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to the MoxStars podcast. I am Menace, one of your hosts, and I'm here with Flash. This is the MoxStars podcast, the #1 podcast on the internet for Magic the Gathering and Dr. Pepper. If you notice on the screen, if you're watching on YouTube where you can support us, by the way, you'll notice that we've got, the light is a little bright, a different setup. Morgan Freeman and Harrison Ford are gracing the wall behind us, encouraging us all to read. We also, if you see on screen, we've surpassed 300 subscribers. Let's go!
We have to, as promised, give a special shout out to our 300th subscriber, right?
We indeed do. And though I did the digging and I dug and I dug and I dug, the 300 subscriber is not public. So
shout out to not public.
To not public.
It's probably Don Cheadle. Quite frankly.
It could be. It very much could be Don Cheadle. We don't know who's watching this show. We, Hire from Playing with Power watches this show. Let's see. Don Cheadle now watches the show. And a few others. We at least a few others.
I know Obama's big into it.
Yeah.
When him and Springsteen got into podcasts, he watched us to learn how to do it.
Yep. That's true in canon.
I want to be clear. Obama only watches free on YouTube. He is not a Patreon subscriber.
No. Yeah, I have not.
I don't want to put misinformation out there.
No, I don't have his credit card number yet. You can also support us on Patreon by becoming an official Pepperhead. Unlike Obama, you can get a free entry into each of our bi-weekly giveaways. Support the show. It goes a long way. We really appreciate it. You can also become a cherry vanilla Pepperhead like Will Rule, K Mr. K, UWP Quirt, D-Mun82, Tommy Cypher, Jacob Hibbard, The Boogie Ghost, Pool Boy Barry, Draw for Turn, and KB. And we have Ravenlift hanging out in the MoxStars Dr. Pepper Lounge with Don Cheadle. Today's episode, we are lucky enough to know the number 15th or the number 15 ranked player in the world, ? On topdeck.gg.
Number one in our hearts.
Atlas will be joining us to give us a rundown of Kenrith, to break it down, to give us the nitty gritty on what makes that deck tick. So, Flash, do you have any pre-recorded messages that you want to send to Atlas before we get into talking about Kenrith?
No, I'm honestly just excited to hear what he has to say about the new meta. Like, one of the best pilots in cEDH, with a deck that played, I think, every ban card. Like,
yep.
The last list I looked at, he had Nadu in there just for value. And I haven't seen a more recent list from him post-ban, at least not posted affiliated with that EDH top 16 ranking. I'm interested what his headspace is in the new meta.
All right. Everybody, welcome to the show. Atlas!
Hi, Atlas.
Welcome to the show, everybody. We have Atlas here to talk about Kenrith. And before we even get started, we have 2 crisp Dr. Peppers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Before we get started, yes, it's necessary if you're going to be on the MoxStars podcast.
Have to have one.
Welcome to the show, Atlas.
Thank you.
Yeah. Today, well, Atlas, I know we talked about it. We've just been chatting, but the big thing news lately is that you are currently ranked as the number 15th player in the world in cEDH. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what the ELO tells me at least.
Yeah, top deck statistics do not lie. You've been one of the best players I've known since getting into the format, and it's every time we play each other, it's always feels like we have mental battles at the table aside from everything else.
Yeah.
And it's always a pleasure playing against you. And there are two moments from our career together that I've two stories that it's like the second time that I ever played in a tournament against you, I brought the same deck, which was Shalai and Halar, and I remember going, I'll see you at the final table, and you looked at me deadpan and you said, no, you won't.
That's so cruel. It's so cruel when you say it like that.
I was like fired up, man. I was like, I gotta get there. I went 0-2 and I was like,
I was waging that mental battle.
yeah, right. No, I've seen you do it before.
Feel the damage.
Yeah. And the other story that I've like with you was I forgot what tournament it was exactly, but it was a little over a year ago, and I was editing the footage. It was like a 3-hour finals game, right? It is like turn 3 or 4, and everybody's playing mid range. You're on your classic Kenrith list.
Yep.
And it was like a sequence of events where someone was gonna like remove something that was holding the game together, and you said, well, if you do that, I would have to react. And then for the next 90 minutes until the game ended, it literally went, players would play a land, pass, because you said you had interaction. So I'm
going to be honest, I do not remember this game.
I had to edit it. So I remember watching the whole thing in excruciating detail, but it was just like, you said that. And then everyone else was like, I can't move. He's looking at me. Like,
they have no counter spells at that point. No protection, nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So you manipulated the game just with one sentence, and then you won the game through a Deathrite Shaman.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I do remember this. Yeah, that was the PDX championship a couple years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it was beautiful. But ever since obviously I've always had respect for you as a player, and it's great to have you on the show as always.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to be back.
Yeah, and today we're going to be breaking down your Kenrith list, newly modified since the recent bannings of Dockside, which was a great focal point of the deck prior.
Yeah, I think basically every single Kenrith list, like they all were pretty Dockside centric. I think mine was definitely less tunnel visioned on it than others, but for sure, like that card it's like you're casting a creature tutor, like that. Most of the time, you're getting Dockside Extortionist because it just pushes you so far ahead.
Yeah, 5 colors.
Yep.
Right? The mana flexibility and the obvious burst of mana that it would give you. And instigate a lot of loops because, well, Kenrith, reanimation king.
Bring him back after he dies.
Exactly. Yeah, your saw in half dual caster Dockside loops were a thing of beauty. But unfortunately, it's dead.
It's dead and gone.
Gone forever. Hopefully. But so today I just want to obviously you're the master of Kenrith. I want to pick your brain a little on these changes, the new tech that you're using to instigate combos, card draw, advantage, right? I know that you single-handedly create advantage through your words. But aside from the words, use your words to explain the cards, right?
Yeah.
So right away, I know I've seen you win games with Deathrite Shaman. Is it still proving to be as effective as it has in the past?
Well, I mean, it is the cheapest planeswalker in the game, so the card's really strong. The card's really strong, right?
Yeah.
It's called that for a reason, and it's a mana dork that casts off of 2 different colors of mana, so you can keep random openers on it. You can fetch for an off-color land to cast it. Like you can go Underground Sea to cast your Heuristic Study on 2 or something, and then just eat that fetch land that got the Underground Sea. To make a mana of another color, but you've cast the Death Run on 1 anyway. It's the card's incredibly strong. It beats One Ring Protection, which is relevant. That's my usual way to beat One Ring Protection. If you're like playing in Swiss and you can't pass the turn, you got to kill him somehow, and that's the way, because I don't play Oracle. And then like just the graveyard hate effect. I have just paralyzed certain players out of like even attempting their combo until they find a removal spell, or like they're trying to politic so and so into like Obium the Deathrite Shaman or something, because they can't do anything. Like if they're a reanimator deck, they can't do anything. If their whole game plan is go cast Animate Dead on like my Hullbreaker Horror or something,
right?
That doesn't work if I'm holding you there with the 1 mana and this little dinky creature.
Yeah, no, this eats Brain Freeze. This eats like notably the one thing it can't eat are two things: enchantments and artifacts.
Yep.
So you can't eat the Lion's Eye Diamond, but when they do present like something that is very obvious, it's snipeable.
Yeah, you can like snipe like a gamble if they use it early, which can be relevant.
Yeah.
If somebody like casts Brain Freeze or like discards it to hand size or something early, generally just snipe that right out of there. Like you mentioned, it can't eat Breach or LED itself, which is unfortunate. But yeah, it also like the damage can matter against certain lists, like Adnaz lists and stuff, especially if there's like 2 of them in a pod. Like that card will get answered just because like you're just draining them for 2 every rotation, both of them. So you got a 4-point life swing right there. And then also it pads your own life total. So if you're in like a slower grindy or mid-range matchup and people are just like randomly like doming each other for 4 every turn, this helps like create that sustain through the long game at a cheaper rate than Kenrith's ability. That really like people don't notice. Like if you activate Kenrith for his 3 ability to gain 5 at the end of the rotation, that really like sometimes you do it 2 or 3 times, people are like, oh, like so and so thinks that that's gonna matter. This game is gonna come down to damage. So like can't let them have that. But if you're just like activate Deathrite Shaman, like you're tracking life totals on paper, and I'm over here like, well, my life total is like 20, so and so's is like 18, this other person's like 36 still. Yeah, I'll eat your mana dork that got killed 6 turns ago with Deathrite Shaman, and like nobody really bats an eye at that, even if you do it like 5 or 6 times in a row and gain 10 life. Like
no, they don't. It's minimal.
Mm-hmm.
Like they don't see it as something that contributes to the overall outcome. They see it as like their attention span is so short. They just see it as the 2 life gone, move on.
Yeah, they're being mana efficient. They're spending mana on this passive game action here. Like that doesn't really matter. I'm not concerned about that because they're not exiling my stuff. I don't care.
Right. Yeah, because it is each opponent. Yeah. If you guys are unfamiliar out there with what Kenrith does, I forgot to do this at the top. It is 4 and a white legendary human noble, a 1 red mana. All creatures gain trample and haste until end of turn. 1 in a green. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. 2 in a white. Target player gains 5 life. 3 in a blue. Target player draws a card. 4 in a black. Put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under its owner's control. This, all of these effects are relevant.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
He's the king of utility, is what I like to call him.
Yeah, like I've seen you use the first ability to literally punish other players. Be like, does your thing want haste? I have the mana. I can make it work. I did that 2 weeks ago. Actually, I was playing the mirror. Somebody was playing a Kenrith deck that was actually very similar. It was based on mine, actually, is what they had said. And so we were playing the mirror, and they had assembled. This was like the last tournament I played with the old ban list. So they'd assembled Nadu, Nomads, Displacer Kitten. Kenrith was on the battlefield. They didn't have Dockside Extortionist yet, I don't think, but they had a Smothering Tithe and a Rhystic Study. So like their board state was like unbeatable. Disgusting.
But yeah, it was just like terrible. They had Nomads in play, like with the Nadu and everything. So we somehow managed to survive their turn by like just like, I don't even know. Like we kind of just convinced them to move to the end of their turn, like persuaded them to somehow, like scared them into it. So they passed, and they were just going to go like Nomads triggers every turn like you used to do, right? And so it got to my turn. We somehow I was untapped, which meant that my interaction was live because I also had a Smothering Tithe, so I had a bunch of mana, and we were somehow able to generate enough interaction to kill like Kitten and Nadu, which was enough to slow them down. And their life total, they'd been punched by Corvold like once before, so they're at like 7 or 8 Corvold damage. And thankfully, we were able to like pass to the Corvold player next in rotation, get the counters up high enough, because I think they did something. It was a Dockside for like 6 or 7 or something. I don't know. But basically, like, I think they got silenced in their upkeep, so they couldn't do anything. But they're like, well, we're gonna lose, so I'm gonna swing at you with Corvold. And the player flashed out an endurance to blocked it, sacrificed it to something, and then I activated my Kenrith, and they just like got lethal commander damage.
Beautiful. Yeah, that trample. Yeah, it I don't know why it says haste and trample.
It's a red ability.
Oh yeah, that justifies it.
Lightning bolt's too strong. Like
yeah, right. No, every effect is beautiful. I've seen you save creatures with the +1/+1 counter. I've seen you avoid death with the gain life clause. I've seen you play a land, pass, and then just draw a card like as the end steps. Like pass through. So,
yeah.
Like, and obviously the 4 and a black, I think when this card first released was like the best effect that, or at least drew the most attention was 5 mana reanimate on a creature. Yeah, beautiful. I'm doing that.
It's really funny too, because like the 5 ability says reanimate a creature from the graveyard to its owner's control. So like if I reanimate an opponent's thing, they get it. But my copy is in Japanese for tournament tech reasons.
Of course.
But it's actually really funny because just how many players don't actually know what the 5th ability does. And they're just like, they'll play entire games out of fear. They're like, I didn't do X, Y, and Z because I thought you were going to reanimate my thing. So I didn't discard it for hand size. And I was like, that would have reanimated to your battlefield. I would have never done that. Like,
right. I've actually forced the table with stacks, like my basically my Doorkeeper Thrall effect.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It had died. Someone was playing in Dockside presenting a loop, and I was playing with Lauren, and he had reanimated the Doorkeeper Thrall to like
stop them.
Boop.
Yeah.
Yep, right there.
Right there.
Well, because I was pointing it out. I was like, you have this in my graveyard. Like, just bring it back. Like,
yes,
it ended up giving me the game. This was that ultimately that very controversial game where I should have been at the final table at that.
Oh yeah. That one. Yeah.
Yep. So, but yeah, it kept the game alive. It's like, it's an ability that like you have to be aware. And Kenrith is that commander. You have to be aware of every graveyard, every creature on the battlefield at all times. Like,
yep. He gives you so many options. You just have to like be able to see the lines.
Right. Yeah. So the next card, as far as creatures go, that really intrigues me. I mean, obviously there are plenty here. We could talk all day.
Yes. Oh, yes. There are like 30 of them, I think.
Yeah. Agatha of the Vile Cauldron. Now, this is a cost reducer. The activate abilities of creatures you control cost X less, where X is Agatha's power. So you can't reduce it to less than 1, but it also has the activated ability, other creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample and haste until end of turn. So essentially a stampede effect that you can like give for probably cheaper than well, no, it's actually the same rate.
Yeah, it is the same rate.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
But this is a cost reduction. You can just keep plugging it with +1/+1 counters from Kenrith to keep bringing that cost down for other things. Is that why you're running it? Is that like...
Yeah, you nailed it. You nailed it, actually. Okay. This is a card that was running around with Kenrith players actually pre-ban even. There were some players that were really, really high on this card. I tested it 2 or 3 different times. Was never super happy with the results because it like was I found it kind of slow and kind of committal. And with the format being like really explosive with Dockside and Nadu, I just found that it didn't quite do enough, especially like the ability is almost irrelevant in this deck. Like her activated one, just because like she's going to give things a temporary +1/+1 boost, and she's going to give them haste, right? And maybe trample. I forget exactly.
Yeah, it's trample and haste.
Trample and haste and the buff. But Kenrith does all of that at a much, much better rate by default.
Especially when you reduce it, like it takes 4 a red and a green, right? And so like you reduce it down to just a red and a green, and it's like, no, I pay the red once, all my stuff gets trample and haste, and then I just pay 1 green for as many +1/+1 counters as I want.
Yeah, and it tracks her reduction effect tracks from her base power, so she starts off as like a slightly suboptimal Biomancer's Familiar.
Or like a Zerta, right?
Yeah, something like that, where it's like those things reduce from 2 at base. But Agatha starts off at 1, which is disadvantageous at first. Like it's a below rate effect. But that said, it does. I think there are 2 things that I like about this card. And then I can go into why I'm playing it now after the bans. But the 2 things I like about this card is that it casts for red-green, which are off-color control pips, which means that like if I have 3 mana up, I could theoretically cast this card on turn 2 for red and green while holding up a blue mana, which means that all my interaction is still alive, versus something like a Biomancer's Familiar. Yes, it pitches to Force of Will and Endurance as opposed to just Endurance. But with that said, I'm tapping my blue pip here, or I have to have 2 blue pips, and double blue is not something that I'm typically fetching for most of the time. That's not something that I want to base my game plan around, because instead I want to be able to spend my time getting double green or double white for like a Court of Calling, an Endurance, an Eternal Witness, or Ranger Captain, something along those lines.
You heard it here first, folks. Green and white better than blue.
yeah. I think so. At this point, control is just like I think in Commander, it's a lot of different things come together. And one of the things you have to be constantly aware of, especially when you're playing multicolor, like 5-color control, is that your pips matter a lot more than you think they do, and they matter a lot more than you think they do way later than you think they do. So if I'm fetching on turn 1 or 2, I have to be thinking what spells I'm going to be casting with that, or what spells I would ideally like to be casting with those pips, like 4, 5, 6 turns from now. And so we were talking actually before we started recording, but like even before the ban, because I was testing Archdruid's Charm for a little bit, but even before the ban, my first 3 fetches of the game, unless I had a reason to find a color other than green, would be triple green, because I'll be playing around the idea that I will find, or I will like Demonic Tutor, Vampiric Tutor for a Court of Calling, just to have access to it for when I'm ready to go off. Yeah, and so like that's kind of similar here, where I want to find those green pips. I want to find those 2 red pips just to have in play, because even though I'm only playing 2 red cards in the deck, and Agatha is really easy, like she fixes herself off of like 1 treasure or a command tower or something, I'm playing around the fact that I want to be casting Dualcaster Mage at any point during the game where I might draw it or have it, and so I need to be tutoring for those double red pips super early if possible.
Right, because Dualcaster becomes a win condition for you later in the game.
Yeah, or even if it doesn't, it just turns into like I've cast that card like to win the game probably more times than anything else, but I've also cast that card like probably a way higher percentage of the time than I should as just like red cancel. Like that card literally just reads counterspell. People will crack a Ranger Captain thinking they're safe from all counterspells, and they'll just jam something with no interaction, and I'll go, oh, that's interesting. You just like cast a tutor? That's really interesting. Dualcaster Mage? Okay, I'll copy your D-tutor. I'll snag Besage you. Breach resolves, Besage you?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
How did I get blown out by this? That could, yeah.
No, it's. I was just wanting to pull it up. The Judge Foil, yes, is $31. This card is a quarter. It is a quarter everywhere, and it is straight up one of the strongest ETB effects that currently exists in Magic.
Yeah,
like, and it has only 1 artwork. Why haven't they given this a more?
I don't know. I can't wait for a secret layer.
Yeah, me too. I'm also waiting for it. So, like, this is not. I mean, the ceiling is so high on this. It can be an ad nauseum. It can be like so many, like
I have cast ad nos multiple times with this deck that never wants to cast ad nos just to find a counterspell for yours. Like,
yeah, and this goes to the graveyard. Like it ends up there for whatever reason. It's like, oh,
do it again.
Reanimate it.
Yep.
Boom.
Back
Something's
in the
on
back
stack.
Again.
I want that.
Yep.
Then Dualcaster says you can have that.
Yeah, and it's amazing what and this just goes to like Magic player psychology, I think, in general, but it's amazing what people will also just let you have because they don't want to spend their counterspell on so-and-so's such and such. So it's like there have been times where it's like I know someone's holding a counterspell, and I'll be like, okay, well, I'll fire my Dualcaster Mage on this like ad nauseum or whatever. My deck doesn't play or want to cast ad nauseum really, but I know you've already said you're not going to counterspell it, so I guess I will Dualcaster Mage it. I'll cast ad nauseum. I'll find cards to win me the game and also counterspell it, and then it will pass to me, and you're really going to wish that you just counterspelled the ad nauseum in the first place.
Right, right, yeah. Why?
Rift, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, it's a beautiful line. It's like you're still doing this all on the stack. You're still like, as things are coming down the chain, you're like, yeah, you just hold on a sec, buddy. I got it. Don't worry, it's mine. And I've seen you do that like multiple times. It's like, the limited experience we have together in games, it's like, God, are those memories just burned into my my frontal lobe?
I know. I do wish we get to play together more because it's always really enjoyable. But
yeah.
Agatha,
I will crush you next time.
Yeah, I've always lived in fear. Your stack decks are potent. But and then Agatha, I guess post ban, I started playing her because the meta did slow down drastically, and I think that part of it was a little bit of like justification. I want to stay in 5 color. I want to stay in red. This is a really good red card that I can play. So like a little bit of like cope there where I'm just trying to like justify playing red. But also it is an incredibly strong card that immediately comes down and says Kenrith's 2 ability is actually a 1 cost.
Yeah.
Which means that you can then target Agatha for 1 green. Guess what? If you target her 3 times, all of his abilities now just cost 1.
Right. It's disgusting.
It's really crazy. And people just like don't want to spend a removal spell, or they'll spend the removal spell on Agatha instead of like Kenrith or something else that like might matter more based on board state, but they'll be scared of whatever thing is like right in front of them, or just not answer it at all because it doesn't win the game directly. And that just gives you a bunch of extra resources, or it puts me in the position of, well, I didn't used to play with this card, so I guess I don't need to play with it now. Like,
yeah, right, exactly. Like it is only upside for me. If it's gone, it's like regular game plan.
Yeah,
like business as usual.
Yeah. So. She's an accelerant, I would say. I would classify her like along the lines of mana ramp, whereas I don't play a lot of that, but she is an accelerant because she gives you extra Kenrith activations when you should not have them.
Yeah, it's like cost reduction is like having additional rocks. It's like the same with like Ruby Medallion, like those medallions, right? So
those spells are incredibly strong.
Yeah, you can cast multiple spells per turn where you wouldn't have been able to before. So like I do. Yeah, I believe that it's absolutely like cocaine for Kenrith.
Yeah, it's almost like, and she actually plays into a lot of like, as I've developed this new core for the list, she plays into the math of a lot of the combos to win the game, actually, because looking back on Dockside and why that card was so good for Kenrith, like it's a reanimator target. It enables loops because it makes so much extra mana. Well, the funny thing is like, there are a lot of cards that like make 1 to 2, maybe even 3 mana based on a situation, but that's not enough to activate Kenrith's 5 ability, right? But the thing with Agatha is that she actually, like those medallions you're talking about, she represents tons of extra mana if you just put a little bit of effort into her and just have her sit there. So like those medallions, if you play out like, I used to play Urza. If you play out like a Sapphire Medallion on turn 2 or whatever, and you cast 4 blue spells, guess what? You saved 4 mana. You made 4 mana off 5 actually, because that spell, maybe even like 10, because that taps for a blue every turn. Like, it's absurd.
Yes, yeah. I didn't even think about that. It's so but you can tap it for mana with Urza.
Yeah,
it's beautiful.
There are a bunch of spells you can cast with those lands you would have otherwise been tapping to activate Kenrith 1 time.
Yeah, and now it's drawing you cards. It's reanimating creatures. It's
absolutely
making your other creatures larger. So as we continue down the creature list here, rapid fire a few of like these that that catch my eye, and I'm very curious.
Yeah, I'll keep it quick.
Right, the Derevi, Cloud of Fairies, and I guess Derevi Cloud of Fairies lines is right here. In the list. Are you using Derevi as a reanimation target? How are you flickering it? How are you like getting it developing crazy advantage off of Derevi? Because you wouldn't be running it unless it was a win condition, I imagine, right?
Yeah, I had toyed with it before in the old version of just playing it as like a ritual creature, but like you mentioned, that didn't end. Like I ended up not doing that because I decided that playing it as a ritual was not very efficient or good. Once again, the meta's a lot slower now, so I've been liking this card because it is a ritual, which allows you to just sort of like take a game action to develop and then go to combat, hit somebody for 2 to 3 damage with like 1 to 2 creatures, untap those lands you just used to play out your piece, and then pass still all mana up.
I'm so dumb, dude. Just literally, it comes out on the battlefield, it untaps a red source, you use the red source, swing with it, and then it basically just generates you.
Yeah, you got 2 free damage you basically just like got 2 free damage from that. Or if you like had Kenrith in play or like extra guys, it just makes a bunch of mana right off of that.
Wow.
Yeah. So that card's there. It also does combo. If you want to, we can go into the loops later. lines have gotten super complex. There's no more A plus Bs really in this deck anymore.
Right.
But then Cloud of Fairies also, it's actually really funny because I think about maybe 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, I was looking at cards, looking to improve my list. Dockside was legal, and I was looking for cards similar to Dockside that I could use to do infinite combos with and like accelerate things with Kitten. Cloud of Fairies came across my radar. I was like, oh, this is cute. I can use it to do the Cloud Shift combo, which is like, that's like my signature like Displacer Kitten combo or whatever. But I was like, oh, this is cute. Probably won't come up. Well, guess what? That same year, like a month after I found that card, I was playing against an Edric deck, which I didn't think was real at that point, but they were playing Cloud of Fairies. My Dockside was exiled. 19 other things were gone, but guess what? I still had access to all of the pieces for the Cloud Shift combo and a clone. So I was able to do the combo with Cloud of Fairies. And I said, that's really interesting. I like it subs for Dockside in that situation. And I was like memeing around for a little bit. And before Dockside got banned, I was actually looking for cards or strategies that were good enough to justify cutting the card because it draws a lot of hate. It was clonable. There were a variety of reasons that I wanted to not play it, right? But ended up not doing that because the card was just too good. But in my primer, I had put Cloud of Fairies can substitute for Dockside, and guess what? It matters. Well, we are now living in 2024 post Dockside, and I've updated my primer. That line is still there. I just put a little strike through and said, yes, it does.
Yeah, it still works.
It still works, and Cloud of Fairies does matter. I told you so.
Yeah, no, that's awesome that it you would think that the deck would take a massive hit losing Dockside, but no, you already. This is the genius of Atlas, people. He already had a backup plan, and it's Cloud of Fairies.
Yeah, yeah.
It just gets like you magnify it with Delny.
Yep, double triggers. The card goes positive. It turns into like baby Dockside, where it's like I would frequently cast Dockside at 2 to make 4 treasures anyways. So if you have a Delny out, does the exact same thing as Dockside was beforehand. Gives you double triggers. Delny double triggers Derevi, so you can get 2 untaps because Derevi is the thing that's triggering there when all the other creatures hit. So you can get double untaps there, which is pretty cool. Like float a bunch of mana, generate extra Kenrith activations to get passive value even without like Nagatha in play. It also means that like Cloud of Fairies synergizes really well with the Derevi plan because it is a free 1/1 flying attacker. So you can just go, you can like on a turn you're going to play Derevi next turn, you just go on curve, Cloud of Fairies, ETB, untap 2 lands, pass, counter magic up. Next turn, 3 lands, Derevi, untap a land, go to combat with Cloud of Fairies, hit, untap another land, 2 mana up, control magic up, pass. And so it just all plays into that like Drago pass pattern while still developing.
So when you have Delny and Derevi out at the same time, you have complete control of your mana. Like as much as you
can basically just like you can usually, I would say, without like being to the point where you're winning the game, I would say the abuse ranges to the point where you probably can take maybe as many as 4 game actions without actually spending any mana.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. The next creature that I think is curious to me is actually Warren's Soul Trader. Like, I think initially, spoilers came out, this card was very hyped. Like,
oh yeah,
it's a sack outlet, right? That generates a treasure, and so I think the immediate was like, oh, this puts Dockside in the grave. Boom.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, but now you've seemed to have found purpose for it. I'm curious what that purpose is.
Yeah, it's another weird card to be playing post-ban because I was definitely not playing this ahead of time. It really hadn't even crossed. It had like been spoiled, like you said, and it briefly crossed my radar. And I said, no, I don't really want to play this. I don't have a desire to play a sack outlet. Well, shortcut to where we are now. And I was working with one of my friends, Josh. He plays to say, and he was like, we were talking through different lines, and I was trying to I was waffling on a couple of different options, and he was looking at my flowcharts and stuff, which are an absolute disaster. But he was looking at them, and he was like, a lot of what you're saying is like ETB triggers or like permanents that you don't want exiled. So like, what about some sort of sacrifice effect, just like for utility? And he mentioned Viscera Seer. I was like, that card sucks. I'm not playing that. But it did bring up like, well, what's the best sacrifice outlet? And we were looking at things, and it was Warren Soul Trader, which is really cool because I was already main decking Kinnan, and without a lot of treasure production, it gave you one extra thing that Kinnan was able to accelerate for, which was neat. Has some cool synergies with Orcish Bowmasters, where you can like, when someone puts Rhystic triggers on the stack, like, you know, they're going to greed. So you sack your token, your 1/1 ahead of time before their trigger resolves. They draw, you shoot someone in the face, get a damage, and then you next time it happens, you sack it again. So you make a treasure every time someone else draws a card, and the life swing on this card is actually neutral. Like you do lose life, but there's the concept of life swings, which is a lot more like talked about in 60 card formats.
Right.
Yeah, where it's like Baneslayer Angel is like, it's a 10-point life swing.
Well, I think the most common for me, like the one that helped me understand why Shieldred was disgusting, was because it was a life swing.
Yep.
You know, just not all at once, but it was.
Yeah, but it's that idea of
life
you are
return.
going up to while your opponent is going down to, more or less. And this is the same thing with like if you're looking at the Bowmasters specifically, because you will just typically, like, you can shoot boards at that point if you need to, but that's utility. You can make the activation itself like life swing neutral by hitting somebody for 1. You take 1. You're both -1, but it means that the life loss, like the swing, is neutral.
You know what's funny about that, like mentally, like almost politically, by taking that game action, is that you are not targeting their board state, and so they care less.
Yeah, it's really amazing. I actually played because this card for probably like the first, like, I think we're like 3 weeks post ban at this point.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's like this came in like the weekend of the ban, and then like for the next 2 weeks, this card was like really week and a half, 2 weeks. It was like I was like 50-50 on it because it generates some wins from weird spots, and like it's cool that it sacks things to reset them. But I was like mid on it. But then I finally got to a situation where like I was like, okay, Warren Soul Trader, Worldly Tutor. All right, so we go Worldly Tutor on 1, get Bowmasters on 2, Warren on 3, pass, and then lo and behold, as one is wont to do, 2 of my opponents cast Ristic Studies, and we were off to the races. And I found myself 3 turns later at about 5 life, but I had like 30 mana on the board, and my opponents were like, "Wait a minute, that's not okay." But yeah, and then you just win from there because you have so much mana. You've basically you're not doing the Chatterfang thing that wins you the game off of establishing channel, but you're more or less doing the same thing. It's just that your opponents actually regulate whether or not you can do it. So to some extent, like, you can also politic tables to be like, oh, well, it's not my fault I'm doing this. I'm just taking optimal game actions with the strategy. The hand I've been dealt. My opponents are responsible. They're drawing cards off Ristic Study. Kill the Ristic Study. Yeah. I'll stop doing this.
Yeah, it's their greed that feeds this machine. So if you can convince them to be less greedy, I'm not going to convince them to be less greedy.
Yeah, because I'm profiting off this. But if you want to red blast their Ristic or something, that's great because it stops 2 players, right? You don't need to just answer my board. You want to answer the Ristic because the card draw is what's going to win. Card draw and mana.
At the end of the day, So yeah, it's a very fair point.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes a lot of sense why it would sit in here. Like, it creates a line where your opening hand shows this, then you tutor Bowmaster. Yeah. And then you profit greed. Yeah. Yep. Beautiful. Gigantoplasm. I love it. We all know why stunt doubles here.
Yeah, we love
just
clones.
Gonna say I have something to do with that.
You do. Actually, this piece is, I was looking at it pre-banning as well, because you could loop it with Dockside Extortionist. The cool thing about Gigantoplasm is that it is a clone with an activated ability.
Right.
For X, you can adjust its power and toughness to X. Well, guess what? X can be 0.
Yeah.
So before Dockside got banned, this card could loop with Dockside, sort of as a pseudo phantasmal image. So it copies Dockside, makes some treasures, kills itself, and reanimate it, right? I actually can't take credit for this. This card is super, super sick, and I was testing it even before the bans. I was testing this card in the Dockside meta because of Hire. Hire found this card and was like, hey guys, what if we play Gigantoplasm as another phantasmal image? And as the Kenrith Discord want to do, a bunch of them were like, this card is cope and we're not going to play it. And I was like, that card seems cool. I will play it.
Yeah. Hire, if you're listening to this, say something. Let us know you're out there.
Yeah. So I definitely got this card from him. It's super cool. It performed okay pre-bans. Wasn't quite efficient enough for the control shell that I needed. In a greedier build, it probably would have been better. Post-ban with the slower format, I can still get to play that control build that I want. But I can play this clone, and now it doesn't loop with Dockside Extortionist, which is unfortunate. But there are actually loops with it and Cloud of Fairies and Gaia's Cradle, because if you have enough creatures, you can just untap a black source, untap a green source, sack the Gigantoplasm, reanimate it as a copy of Cloud of Fairies, do it again, and then generate infinite green, which filters into other colors as well.
I can see the layers here, just having if Agatha is out or Agatha has been part of the game plan
Oh, yeah.
prior to like seeing this. Like, it's like things like that, Cloud of Fairies, all of like even just Kinnon's involved, and all of this. It incrementally adds up, and this is just your creatures. We've talked about so many different loops and lines that exist in the build.
This is what I spend my time doing. Like some people like read books or whatever, and I just like to sit there and just theory craft. So when this niche scenario comes up, what happens in that board state? What do I do with those cards? How do these interact with other meta decks and things like that? And so that's how I like to spend my evenings or whatever. But yeah, Gigantoplasm's got a lot of sick stuff to it. It's super cool. It like you were mentioning, it wombo combos with Agatha just because you can pay, like if Agatha's power is 5, you can pay 5 into Gigantoplasm's ability. I guess you have to pay at least 1 mana actually because of Agatha, but you can pay 5 into it off of Agatha and 1 mana and make it a 6/6, which is like randomly cool. It also like there's weird stuff you can do with Soul Cauldron. This one hasn't come up yet, but I cannot wait for the day where I imprint Gigantoplasm's ability on an Agatha Soul Cauldron and then slap that counter onto Talion and have a Delny in play. And every upkeep, I'm activating that Gigantoplasm ability for 0, so that thing's a 1/1 and double triggers.
God, that's gross.
Never came up. It will someday, and I cannot wait.
It will. I mean, the Christmas Land stuff, like you pray for it, you hope for it, and the day it does, it's so rewarding.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right. Creatures covered.
Oh yeah.
Talion's great. Like
Talion is there. He's an all-star, especially in a slower format where the mana costs tend to be a little more predictable. Cards nuts. Nuts.
It's a beautiful thing.
Life totals matter now.
Yes, they do. Your sorceries, rather limited.
Oh, yes.
We won't spend much time here. Reanimate, Demonic Tutor, Eldritch Evolution, and Savine's Reclamation.
Mm-hmm.
Any lines that you're seeing, like any for that would make these, I guess, stand out more than they normally would?
Savine's Reclamation is really just in there for like play patterns with intuition. Like you can just get things back. It's also really cool. Like it combos with Entomb, and it's like a reanimate for non-creature stuff. So like there have been games where I've definitely gone like turn 1 Entomb Rhystic Study, turn 2 or 3 or whatever it is, cast Savine's Reclamation on Rhystic Study. Yeah. Or like intuition piling for like 2 lands and a Savine's Reclamation or something, and then putting like Gaia's Cradle back into play after it's not given to you. So yeah, it's just beautiful. Like generic stuff like that. I actually end up cutting Neoform after the bans because getting to that specifically 2-cost mana was like much less important. So I ended up cutting Neoform, and with the cut of Neoform, Spellseeker became less relevant. So I also ended up cutting that out of the creature suite.
Yeah, I saw that. Okay, so just so everyone is aware, here at the bottom, you can't see it, but the deck only has 99 cards, which I saw in the Discord server you were talking about what would make the cut since Neoform was cut, and it's down here in the considering board.
Oh yeah, my last creature. I'm pretty sure this last slot is still in testing. Not quite certain. There, like you can see now, there are a bunch of options. The Elk Glimmers, like hella strong.
I love this card.
The card is nuts, right? Doesn't do exactly what I wanted to do because I was looking for something that like synergizes with Displacer Kitten and like on an ETB trigger, and it also was just like a powerful engine in its own right, and it also could win the game, and it also does this and that, and like I was looking really specifically at things that I could spin into play with Kinnon if Kitten was already into play and start doing stuff. Tivit, we're pretty sure that Tivit's locked for the main deck right now.
Yeah, give it a shot. Right?
Yeah, I've played it exactly once in a game, and the card is just disgusting. Like it came down, I had a Kinnon in play, card made 4 mana, so it was actually a 2 mana card. We just gave it haste, we made 4 more mana, so the card went like mana positive and produced card draw. Like it's just silly.
Is this like when it goes into the list, is this like a secret intuition target? You create lines that you can just like put it in the pile and make them throw it to the grave for as a
you definitely could. Yeah, you could definitely do that. You'd be like, oh, this card doesn't matter, you have to give me the counter spell or whatever. Here's my reanimate that I'm, and my Tivit, and I'm gonna get this back later.
Right. Yeah. Reanimate Tivit and with the thing you really want.
Yeah, like you're like, oh, I handle this problem now. So yeah, there's definitely stuff there. But yeah, the card's just really strong. It has hexproof. Tivit is seeing an uptick in the meta, so like another peep into like the things that I consider ahead of time is like I play Phyrexian Metamorph, and you can copy Time Sieve with that card. So like theoretically you could go infinite over the top of another Tivit who's Time Sieve comboing by like reanimating a Phyrexian Metamorph, or like Court of Calling it into play after they've already activated and resolved their Time Sieve, and then you activate and resolve your Time Sieve after them, which gives you the first extra turn.
Woo. Beautiful. The and just so Flash has justification here, Hazel's Brewmaster is in the considering.
Yep. Yeah, it does. It's an incredibly strong card that does not quite do what I want it to do, I think, but I definitely have to consider it because it's absurd right now.
Yeah. Someday it will make the cut, I'm sure.
I've already cloned it multiple times in the new meta, so that's why I was like, this card's strong.
Yeah, disgusting. Okay, so instance, we have your signature Cloud Shift.
Oh yes,
right here.
Can't leave home without it.
Right, and now Strict Serenade finds room here in the post-ban meta.
I was actually playing it pre-ban.
Okay.
I've been playing this card for several months. I think ever since. I think I was still playing Mana Drain at Cowtown, and then after Cowtown, I was talking with Corey Hayslip, and he was explaining to me why Strix is just so insanely good because I wasn't quite sold on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I put it in the list. I haven't come back off it since. There are a bunch of like weird random play patterns you can like make around specifically Strix in the political spectrum, but basically the card answers what I was answering with Mana Drain already, which is creatures. It does it for 1 less mana, gives them a bird, which is almost never relevant. It doesn't ritual, but the ritual hadn't been super important for a long time anyways, and it does answer every single card that wins the game, every single win the game combo card in the format except for Underworld Breach combo. And that's just because, like, LED, if you counter it into a breach, it doesn't matter. Otherwise, it would stop that too.
Right. Yeah, it'd be a very thin line where it would.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
They're very they're strapped for cards in the graveyard.
It counters Oracle. It counters creatures. It counters like Planeswalkers. So if someone tries to like protect themselves with a 3 fairy or whatever, you can stop that. It counters the One Ring if someone's trying to jam that as a combo piece or whatever. Like it just counters everything. Counters every commander in the game too, which is really relevant.
Yeah, that was like pretty much the first thing that came to mind when it was spoiled. I was like, oh, so are we doing more birdsong spells? Because like this one is, it's incredibly powerful. It's like why I think when Midnight when Innistrad, whatever the most recent visit to Innistrad with like Wash Away and stuff like that. I think Wash Away, when it first initially was like introduced, I was just like, oh, that's a commander counter like for 1 mana. Right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And then this is just such a wider scope.
They did a much better job with this version of that because no one wants to cast Cancel unless it's red.
Right. No, this is the far stronger version, and you also have Swan Song. You are a Birdsong deck. This is also answers so many. This protects the win. It protects.
Yep. This card can protect you. It can stop someone else's protection or their counter spell on the stack. You can go counter Grand Abolisher. They go counter spell back, and you go Swan Song again. So they get 2 birds, and they get 2 birds, and that is nothing.
Right. And this is something that handles Underworld Breach. So this this is the coverage that you're missing from the other one. Basically covers everything at that point.
Oh yeah.
Let's see. Any interesting I know you're a big fan of Delay.
Yep.
Always here. And
card is so strong.
Ghostly Flicker. This is your Cloud of Fairies line.
This is the new Saw in Half. So Saw in Half combos with Dualcaster Mage, comboed with Eternal Witness, comboed with Dockside Extortionist.
Right.
Sad. Dockside's banned. No, that's not sad. We're happy.
We're partying.
Yeah, we're partying on this. Yeah. But we did need something to replace that slot because only comboing with 1 card and having ETBs that did not generate tremendous value on an instant was kind of medium, to be honest. So we replaced it with Ghostly Flicker, which fills a similar-ish role. It pitches the Force of Will, which already the stocks are up on that. But it does, I think it does 3 things really, really well that Saw in Half struggled with. So we'll go from top down. Saw in Half requires an outlet on the battlefield in order to win the game at instant speed, whether that's a Mana Dork, a Dockside Extortionist, an Orcish Bowmaster, something like that. Ghostly Flicker can target artifacts, creatures, or lands. So as long as you have something that produces blue, which you do because you're casting Ghostly Flicker, Dualcaster and Ghostly Flicker will win the game in their own right by just making infinite mana. I've already done this before, actually. I was in a losing state position. They had ways to nuke everything on my board. So I just played out a Grand Abolisher with a Derevi and like a stolen old Gnawbones in play. Have my board absolutely just obliterated in response to the Abolisher because they can't stop the Abolisher.
Right.
Because they're not playing Strix Serenade. But have my board obliterated, end up with no permanents in play other than my lands. And then I resolve the Abolisher. Move through steps and phases to empty mana pools, and then go Ghostly Flicker, Dualcaster Mage on an empty field with no other cards in my hand. And they go, oh, and I make infinite mana, cast Kenrith, and just kill them right there.
Wow.
Yep. So you can. It's a nice clean 1/2 combo that doesn't require a combat step or something without Kenrith to win the game.
It almost feels more effective.
It is actually. I'd been considering it pre-ban, but the fact that the Saw in Half effectively double flickered Dockside Extortionist and put it in the graveyard for a third flicker, as well as having loops that it could do with Eternal Witness and Dockside was just too strong. But now we're on Ghostly Flicker, and it is technically, I think, more effective as well as pitching to force. So that's the first thing it does better. Second thing it does better has Cloud Shift text. It's from the Avacyn Restored cycle, the original Innistrad. So just like Cloud Shift flickers a stolen creature, reanimated creature, to the battlefield under your control as opposed to its owners, Ghostly Flicker does the exact same thing for lands, for artifacts, and for creatures. So if I steal 2 creatures, it does the same thing. I can reset artifacts, which has been actually relevant within like the past week even. I've used a Phyrexian Metamorph to clone an Arcane Signet that I needed to fix my colors. A couple turns pass, board state changes, someone puts a cannon in play. I have a Smothering Tithe in play. Ghostly Flicker, pass priority, targeting Gaia's Cradle and Arcane Signet. Everyone goes, they pass priority, so they can't dual caster combo with it if we don't respond. We'll just all pass. They all passed. It comes back in as a copy of Kinnan, and now I had a Kinnan and a Smothering Tithe, and the game is just kind of over.
Wow. I'm like, I would be the voice of reason at the table. Like, I'd be like, we know that's not an Arcane Signet.
Yeah, well, they knew it too. They were like, oh, it's going to be a Tidespout Tyrant. So we just kill the Tidespout Tyrant in response with our creature removal. Which, like, to be fair, like, yeah, that's very scary, right?
Yeah.
They're like Deadly Rollick, because we can't hit the Metamorph. It's an artifact, right? So they Rollick the Tidespout Tyrant, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be a Kinnan just like it always was. And then just proceed to make a bunch of mana and spin and do stuff.
Okay, so instead of waiting, they should have, they should have waited.
They could have waited. It's scary at that point.
Right. Kinnan is alive at that point, and then you still have the opportunity to do all of your activations with a Kinnan on the board.
Yes, exactly.
So you do have to like thread that needle and like figure out when you're most vulnerable. But that was not the moment.
Yeah. So that's the second thing, is it targets multiple permanent types and puts them into play under your control. So if I like Opposition Agent, a Gaia's Cradle or something, I can flicker that and it still re-enters under my control. So I can just ritual with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that like first time, I think it was like, I was considering like Ephemerate for like doubling a Dockside, and then someone was like, just play Cloud Shift, and it might have been like, it was
probably me.
It was you or someone from your group, and I was just like, but it doesn't it doesn't
do it twice.
Rebound. Yeah, and then no, and then they're like, but if you get draked, like,
anti-drake tech,
it is anti-drake tech. And so it's like one of those things where I think the first time I played against you, you were still very much on a like Drake control list where you were stealing multiple creatures a turn with Gilded Drake effects. And so using a Cloud Shift to like
and we're back into that meta since things have slowed down. Things are creature based again. I've already had board states where I've had 2 Drakes on my battlefield. Guess what those turn into? Whatever I want them to be.
Yeah, exactly, right? Clones, Drakes, everything. It's like pure control.
Oh yeah. But then like the third thing, I was just going to mention this one real quick.
Yeah.
Is like one of the big weaknesses of my deck pre-ban was that it actually couldn't beat a Torpor Orb or a Rest in Peace. Like we just didn't have ways to out ourselves to those things aside from removal or counter spells, like stopping those from hitting.
Right. Too dependent on the grave.
Yeah, too dependent on the graveyard. Because for those of you who don't know, Saw in Half doesn't actually work if the creature doesn't die. And if there's a Rest in Peace effect like a Dothy or something in play, the creature doesn't die, so you don't actually get to create the copy. You just paid 3 mana as a bad destruction spell. You just cast murder, like, which I lost the top 16 match because of not knowing that. So I didn't know that. So now we're on Ghostly Flicker, and this means that we actually have at least one combo that explicitly does not interact with the graveyard at all in order to get us there.
Beautiful, because I am playing more Rest in Peace.
Oh yeah, it's super duper strong right now. The stocks are even higher than they were pre-ban.
Right. Yeah. I mean, after the printing with the Enchanted Evenings, whatever, the Child's Veldrain stuff, it hit rock bottom, but no, it's now in more players' hands. They can, yeah.
Cards insane. If you can afford to play Rest in Peace because you are not doing anything more than like one graveyard shenanigan, like not a graveyard based deck, and you can afford to play Rest in Peace, you should definitely do that. It hoses so many things.
Yeah. So Intuition, obviously here in the deck, the lines.
There are no true lines. It's a political tutor.
I was gonna say it's innumerable.
Yeah,
you
it's
have
double Entomb and also give me Force of Will. It is.
Yeah.
It is. I have nothing to do as far as like a counterspell or removal spell this turn. At your end step, Intuition for Savine's Reclamation, Rhystic Study, and Gaia's Cradle. It is give me this opposition agent, and I will stop the Sisay player from killing us on their turn. Also, I'm going to be throwing this Tivit and this Kinnan into my graveyard to put back with Kenrith right now. So it's just like a lot of flexibility and utility, and pitches the Force of Will. So.
Yeah, we all know that holding a gun to your opponent's head is the best way to get.
Oh yeah, yeah. We are losing the game. Give me what I want.
Yeah, the classic Atlas move. Your artifacts, they've been stripped bare.
They have.
You know.
Yep. We have no more Mana Crypt. And we were already playing a really slim artifact package. Used to be on the One Ring. We cut that too because the meta was too fast. It's slowed down a bit. I've been waffling on whether or not to go back up it, but Soul Cauldron has definitely earned its spot post-ban, especially with dorks being so prevalent, like in the new meta. Just one person gets their Birds of Paradise OBM'd because they caught a stray, and I can slam this card and turn my I don't know, my Delny or my Polywog Prodigy into a Birds of Paradise.
Right, yeah, the Prodigy is probably like one of the better targets to hit.
Yeah, Orcish Bowmaster Army, just anything really.
Yeah, which I'd love to hear your thoughts on Polywog Prodigy as well, because the card
is wild. I've heard people saying that it is like Kenrith players actually saying that the card's not super strong, it hasn't been doing a lot for them. At least in the groups that I play with, they 86 this card on site. Like it gets one counter and they say, that's too much.
Yeah. Well, that was our prediction too. When we saw it initially, we were like, okay, so this is a crazy card draw engine. It's it's like it's a Remora.
Yeah, it's Rhystic Creature. It's Rhystic Creature. It gets big. It's not Bowmasterable. It blocks super good. It untaps if you happen to control a Valley Floodcaller. So like in the world where you like clone or reanimate a Floodcaller, and then you have like Agatha Cauldron, or like on Birds of Paradise, this thing just turns into a mana battery along with birds, along with the Revi. Like all of this just random stuff just happens to fall into place. Yeah, and for all of you out there, the Evolve text, it considers power and toughness, so it's going to get a counter sooner than you think. Mm-hmm. Like it's pretty crazy. You're going to be at 2 in no time. Yes, especially with Kenrith's number 2 ability. You can also like you find a stalled board state. Everyone's just casting their like 4 mana, 3 mana sorceries or whatever, and you're like, this thing's a 5/5, so I'm gonna draw a card. Yeah, or 5/7, I guess. Like, right. Yeah. It becomes your. Well, I'm sure you were playing it before Nadu was banned, but like Nadu, I think when it initially came out, everyone was like, "Oh my god, this is the best commander ever." I was like, no, that goes really well into Kenrith, and you found that out. Yeah, 1 mana activation to to like get that Nadu trigger to like keep rolling. Yep. It's kind of crazy, but hence no more. Just gone. Thank God. Yeah, it is a good thing that it is gone. Your enchantments. You're playing more enchantments than the average player. You've won my heart. Oh, really? Oh, good. What's the average enchantment? I don't know. People are usually just on Underworld Breach, Rhystic Study. Underworld Breach, Rhystic Remora. And that's the whole 3. Yep. We're done. Yeah. But now, I think you're right on here with Touch Spirit Realm. That channel ability is far too good to ignore. Smothering Tithe. Now that you have even said the format has slowed down a little bit more, that Smothering Tithe, it just makes sense. It's actually, in my opinion, it's the new Dockside Extortionist. Like, I will keep hands like to Smothering Tithe as fast as possible, even if they don't really do anything else, because I will draw the action, or I will have the mana to make the activation on Kenrith to find action or do something. I've watched Sisay players jam this card, pass, and just sit on it, and then win games off of it 2 rotations, 3 rotations later when they have 9 activations banked for far too long before the ban, and now after the ban. Like if a Sisay player jams this card, like you should, like I said, one of my best friends plays this card in Sisei, and it is his favorite card to find, like pre-ban E2. So it's like if they play this card, like you kill this card or you will lose the game to Sisei.
Yes, it is. Quick. Is this Judge Foil the version that you have in the deck?
Yes, everything is.
It's my favorite.
Everything is the version I have in the deck.
It's my favorite version of this card.
Yeah.
It's beautiful artwork, but like the card itself, we were talking a little bit about this before we hit record, was that there is a mental block in our minds that Dockside is still there. It can't hurt us anymore. But we still have to get through that and realize that now we are all greedy dragons and we can sit on our hoards of treasure.
Yeah, yeah.
This is something that it won't hurt you. Like for having it on the battlefield, you're not going to lose the game because you put a smothering tithe down.
Yeah, I think white is like, yes, it's definitely slower than red and even a lot of probably the rest of the colors too at this point. But that said, like it also, that color gives you the pieces and the resources to play a slower game with stacks pieces, with hate bears. And because of that, you now get to play the strongest ramp card in the game. Like it's incredibly easy to cast, even without Mana Crypt. Like just like turn 2 Dark Ritual, White Source gets you there. Turn 2 Mana Vault land gets you there. You can cast this card on turn 1 with the right permutation.
I was going to say, there's a Christmas land turn 1.
Like Lotus Petal, Mana Vault, land, this card. On turn 1, you will probably win that game if it does not get like Mindbreak trapped right there or something.
So Necromancy, just
it's an animate dead.
Things.
It's hittable with Samin's Reclamation.
Instant speed.
It's instant speed. It creates weird things with the cleanup step, so you can like play around Angel's Graces, and you can play around silence effects with this card if you like sequence properly and stuff. Yeah, it's just really strong. It's easy to cast. You Dark Ritual into it in worst case scenario. Like it's just good. Takes from anyone's graveyard.
Right. Yeah. That is a line of text that a lot of people don't realize. They think it's just their graveyard with Necromancy, because there's this. Even though they reprinted it and tried to simplify the text, it still does not make a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's a weird card. It doesn't target until it enters the battlefield.
Right.
So it's like people are like, what are you targeting? Like it's like a clone. I don't have to tell you. So if you're gonna counter it. Otherwise, mess around and find out. Like, there's that.
Good way to put it.
Yeah, I think It is unfortunate. The card actually got eroded when it got reprinted, which I was unaware of until like the other week. They changed the text. The card used to be Boseiju proof, but it now has a trigger to bring the card back, just like the other animate effects. It used to be worded that the card did not have to be on the battlefield to create the reanimate effect. But they adjusted that text. So,
wow.
Yeah, and now still has to be in play. Shucks.
Yeah, it got a little worse, but still good enough to play.
Still very good, yes.
Yeah. All right. Lands. You're pretty straightforward here. You're in 5 colors. You have to be. Like, you can't be dancing around too much. But obviously, Otawara, Boseiju is interaction, forms of that, and colors for days.
Yeah. We have 2 spell lands. I wish I could be on all 3, the third one being Talongates, but sadly, not being on Crop Rotation or Archdruid's Charm, being super pip intensive deck, we just don't have the flexibility to play that card, even though it is absolutely absurd. It does not produce, if it produced any color, I might be able to find a slot for it, but it only taps for colors without already having a mana.
Right.
Not quite good enough.
I was going to say that it has the filter, but a little too slow.
Yeah. And same thing with Shifting Woodlands, just a little too slow. I can turn on Delirium, but realistically, my commander already does that effect, and it does it permanently. So aside from like bringing back a Rhystic Study temporarily or something, which I have Savine's Rec for, like there's nothing that I really like would love to copy out of the graveyard.
Yeah, for me and my tempo, like the tempo style that I like to play, Shifting Woodlands plays really well into that, right? Like I can allow things to sit and rest and like feel the tempo of the game and activate it, put something in play. Here, it's like, I guess it makes sense that it's not permanent, so it doesn't reward you in the same way, right?
Yes.
Turn after turn after turn. Okay, so land's pretty straightforward. This list is pure fun.
I think so. Yeah.
I love looking at it. Like it's like if every version of this is the one that's in the deck, this is I imagine such a beautiful, fun deck to like shuffle and look at.
It's hard sometimes to get lost trying to find something.
Yeah.
Like where's
yeah. Oh, that Derevi looks good. So like walk us through a couple of the lines quick before we get out of here. Like what are we not seeing that we haven't already talked about?
I think the hardest part about this deck to describe, and the thing that I received the most requests about, like, on on Discord and like in my comments and stuff is like how do you win the game? Which, like, to be fair, like, it's a very reasonable question. None of these cards look like they just, like, there's no 1-2 punch button aside from Dualcaster, Ghostly Flicker.
Right.
But I was actually talking to my friend Aaron the other day about like just like the play patterns are based around control and stuff, because a lot of decks just try to go zoom, they jam their thing, it gets countered, they pass, and they either do nothing or they try and jam again later. I think control has to be a little bit more conservative in how it plays, and that's why we pay a lot of attention to like cards like Cloud of Fairies that allow us to go play a piece, untap mana, pass.
Yeah.
Because without Dockside, we can't just like tap, cast Dockside, cast something else, hold up treasures, and pass. Which is what we were doing before, but now we have to be a little bit more intentional about how we do that, which isn't bad. The play patterns are more or less the same. It's just learning how the cards are there. The main thing is like understanding that we want to play like one piece, pass the turn, play another piece, pass the turn,
Right.
play another piece, pass the turn, and like, and you're interacting people like the whole way, saving the table, being the good guy, because that's what the deck does, right up until you've assembled this like Rube Goldberg machine that no one else saw coming. Yeah, and now you have a 5-card combo on the battlefield, which like we actually are playing 5-card combos at this point. Like
Flash is gonna love you said Rube Goldberg machine. He's gonna love that.
Yeah, it's just like it's one of those things where it's like you're playing pieces that are good. Do not get me wrong, they are strong pieces. Like Agatha's a very scary card, but also like some kind of force of will that when like you haven't even cast your Kenrith yet, or like maybe you have cast your Kenrith, but you only have like 4 or 5 mana. Like no one's gonna force of will your Agatha usually in most reasonable situations when they know that like the person to your left is like has been representing ad nauseum the whole game. They're not going to go fire that off on this or like on your Eternal Witness or something like that, even though they know it's a combo piece at this point, right? Or like they're not going to counter your main deck Kinnan or whatever. And then you cast the next piece and it's just like that. It's like, this card's good, but it doesn't win me the game per se. And then you cast the next piece. It doesn't win me the game per se. But like so-and-so's like their board state's better too. The game has gone on. And then like 6 turns later, you're like, yeah, I'm going to cast this card. And they're like, okay, I'm going to counter it. You're like, okay, great. I'm going to reanimate it. And now I'm going to win the game because these other 3 cards that you also let resolve, like it's not efficient to answer everything that this deck is casting because none of them win the game on them until the last piece is put into rotation. And you can only effectively interact with the last piece. Otherwise you're just choosing to lose.
Well, yeah, and then we've talked about the web that you're spinning here with everything involved in your combo lines. Like something we didn't even talk about, which we know is a combo line, is Displacer, Eternal Witness, Lotus Petal, and
that's one of the easy ones. Yeah,
it's super easy. It's very straightforward. Most people know it exists, but it is hidden. Almost seems like it's hidden here. Like Eternal Witness becomes a reanimation toolbox piece for you.
Especially since we cut like Spellseeker and stuff. There's no like Kitten Spellseeker used to be like an A+B. If you have 1 extra black mana, you go like Dark Ritual and you entomb and reanimate and all that stuff. It gets you the Witness and you win the game. But without that, we're even less on the A+B plan. And yeah, Witness just like rebuys like a fetch land or a counterspell or a Mystic Remora that you sacked or something like that. And it just sits there. It gets 2 triggers with Delny, which is randomly cool. But yeah, it just kind of does the thing. And then like you end up in board states where you're like, okay, well, I have this Cloud of Fairies on the battlefield, and I also have this Delny, and I also have this Eternal Witness, and I've cast all of these, and like we're in a counter war, somebody's winning the game, we're fighting, I'm drawing cards off my Ristic or my Polywog or whatever, and I drew into a Ghostly Flicker. Okay, I'm gonna Ghostly Flicker in response, target Eternal Witness, target Cloud of Fairies. Okay, I'll flicker both of these, Ghostly Flicker goes to the graveyard, and now we're gonna do a variant on the Cloud Shift combo where Witness is gonna pick up that Cloud Shift, which is the Ghostly Flicker, because it flickered itself, so we can't target until flickers in the graveyard. Cloud of Fairies is going to untap 4 lands, which you actually only need 2 lands for because it can untap 2, float 2 in response, untap 2, float 2 in response. Gives you 4 mana, which is Ghostly Flicker +1, plus any other spell that you choose to pick up with the second Eternal Witness trigger. And then you just kind of like make infinite mana just like by happenstance. Like just random board states like that occur all the time. And you can make it happen way more consistently and in a way more like lethal manner, way more devious manner if you're like intentional with how you deploy your pieces, when you deploy your pieces, what you like, you politic people into letting resolve. Like don't counter this because like I'm not going to win the game with this right now. Like it's like, yeah, it's scary for me to have like this Eternal Witness or this Delny or whatever, but it's not doing anything, right? Like it's just kind of here until it's not.
Yeah, no, this like that's I guess the beauty of the build and the beauty of the play style, right? It's very politically minded because I know that you're watching for tells. Like,
yeah,
you cannot show emotion in front of Atlas while you're playing the game. He will see it. and he will react appropriately. Like, but it is like, it's very true that none of these pieces scream, I win the game, except for maybe Dualcaster Mage.
Yeah,
That like right off.
People, alarm bells.
Yeah. Alarm bells start going off when you see a Dualcaster Mage.
Displacer Kitten, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, that too. So it's, everything, like nothing else is like very telling, but it just falls into place. It's like watching a very, very slow car crash. If you're sitting at the table with Atlas, it is happening in slow motion, the inevitable. And it's very hard to put you off that plan because one card leads to another, leads to another, leads to another until you have control over what's happening, which it doesn't seem like I think with how people are brought up playing the game or how they've unless they play with you consistently, they don't see the land pass as like a threat.
Whereas people in my group, that I actually have one player who I play with pretty consistently, Forrest, called me out the other day. She was like, "It is so frustrating. Just let me play my game. Stop playing a land and passing." I was like, "Sorry, that's just what I'm gonna do." But yeah, it's really funny. I actually or like players who know me, like I'd been talking about my new Cloud of Fairies tech like post ban. Very first game that I played the deck, wasn't even comboing, wasn't doing anything like cool. It just Cloud of Fairies, cast it. Nothing else was happening at the table, and my friend just hard cast Mindbreak Trap my Cloud of Fairies. He's like, "That card scares me, and I don't need this right now."
And it needs to be exiled.
Yeah,
right?
And it's gone forever. And I was like,
"Yeah,
it's so sad."
Hey, it's genius. It's like it's a beautiful.
Yeah, if it was free, it was like the free thing to do because nothing else was going on. Everyone was stalled, so it was like, we'll just delete that for now.
Yeah, because they know it's part of a line.
Like, I don't know when this is relevant. It will be.
Yeah, that's another red flag, like right there. Like, but they're not common red flags that you would normally see in more popular decks or in a larger meta.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, no, it's quite the Rube Goldberg machine.
It really is, yeah. And then, like you said, plays into the political strategy. It's very passive, but it plays in that political strategy, which like I have a whole I've developed like because control's so different in Commander compared to like 60 card, where you're like
you can talk your way into new scenarios.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've actually there have been a couple of players that have been like sought out advice from me in our area before about just like what is it about playing control in like a multiplayer format that's different. And so like we've been like worked together to sort of like articulate some of the like the basic steps around that. So maybe I'll come back and talk to you about playing control at some point. But yeah, it's just it's really different than just like counterspell threat, play bomb on turn 5. Yeah. Counterspell more threat.
Right. Yeah. It's like I think you've I'm not sure if you've coined the catchphrase yet, but playing to not lose. Right? Like,
yeah, I've been hearing that a lot. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Play to win. I'd prefer to not lose.
Yeah. We are the antithesis to what Dylan and Cam have going on.
Yeah.
Like
play to win.
Yeah.
I just would prefer to not lose the game and win later.
Yeah. I would prefer to not lose, which will ultimately result.
If I never lose, that means I've either drawn my game or I will win.
You're scoring points no matter what.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
Got to stay on the board.
This is like Moneyball, like in a way, right? Where it's like you're making it up in the oh God. I can't think of the word, but you're making it up in different ways, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not aggressive in pursuing the win, you're still scoring points, which means that you have created an opportunity that if you were to win later, you make up for the draw.
Exactly. Yeah. Like as long as, and that's actually been like, that's been my tournament rep for the past couple events I've gone to. It's been like draw, win, and then you make the cut or whatever.
Yeah. And then you've created an opportunity. That's the thing about making the cut, right? If you make the cut, you have created an opportunity to win the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you don't necessarily like first seed's nice, but like you don't need to be first seed in the top 16 cut or whatever. Like, are you technically disadvantaged? Yes, but can you overcome that with skill, some luck, and like good politics? Absolutely.
Right.
So that's sort of been my experience there. Is like, yeah, it was really funny that I played an event at Gabby's, the most recent major that they threw, and I was talking to the head judge, and he was like, "Yeah, I really thought you were going to go 006 for the first half of day one, because I was just like draw at time, and then the last two is just a win out, and then made the top cut very very cleanly, fifth in Swiss, which is like second seed in your pod. That's like very very good.
So, yeah, very rare you get 2 wins and you end up 5th.
Yeah, you get no losses. Your tiebreakers are good. You've played the whole field. Like, not lose.
Yeah.
Not lose, better than win.
Yeah. I remember way back in the early 2000s, it was like in NASCAR, somebody had won by placing second, never actually winning. They won the NASCAR Cup by just getting.
They just scored all of their points
Yeah,
from the league.
yeah. They just scored all their points, getting second, third, fourth, or whatever. But whoever was winning those races was getting first, 16th, 29th. Like,
yeah, they just
and he's like
very fluctuating.
he's just consistently in the top 5, and he's like, yeah, what's up? I don't need to win.
I'm just chilling. I'm just
Yeah.
doing my thing. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then once you get to those top cuts where your rounds are untimed, if you don't lose and your deck has better inevitability, which mine does,
Yours does.
then you will just win.
Yes. Yeah. It's a beautiful. Yeah. I will say it a million times. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it. Atlas, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. It was
joining
an
us on the
absolute
show.
pleasure.
Yeah. What do you have? What do you have there in your hands?
Oh yes, I've been. I'm a Magic player. I like to fidget with cards. So this whole time, you might have seen, I'm fidgeting with these sweet new MoxStars tokens. So you can they got
What?
fronts and backs. Yeah,
We have tokens.
yeah.
I'm telling you, Flash, me so happy.
they feel really good too. They got that nice little click to them.
Yeah. So if you want a set, join the Discord server. Reach out to us there, and we can get some in your hands.
I'll be repping these at the next tournament I go to too, so you can
Heyo.
see them in person.
Yeah. And I will have plenty of copies at MagicCon. I had literally 2 stacks right in front of me a second ago. I swear to God. But yeah, you can also find the MoxStars at MagicCon, where if you're there, you can jam some games with us. You can find us at the Mountain of Dr. Pepper, and I will have tokens available. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and for Atlas, again, thank you.
It was an absolute pleasure.
Make sure you support us on YouTube. Make sure you like, subscribe, ring that bell for more notifications. Find us on all major podcasting platforms. You can support us on Patreon and become an official Pepperhead. And support us there as well. And I think that's pretty much it. We have tokens.
Yep.
Get your hands on some, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us. Bye.